Welcome back to the ALSA UK podcast. Today's guest is someone who reminds us that science isn't just research, it's resilience, return, and rebuilding. Dr Egzona Morina is a neuroscientist, educator, and founder with her PhD from the University College of London and research experience from MIT. She's at the forefront of environmental neuroscience, studying how pollution, heat, and noise shape the human mind. But her story doesn't stop at her lab. Egzona returned to Kosovo not just with knowledge, but with a mission to build what didn't exist when she was growing up. She founded the Xheladin and Xhufe Marina Foundation, launched BrainCamp, Kosovo's first neuroscience summer school, and created Brain Book, an AR children's book making brain science accessible in multiple languages. She now leads the environmental neuroscience research incubator, operating between Boston and Prishtina, designing experiments grounded in the realities of both contexts. In this episode, we explore what it means to carry both science and story, to be shaped by displacement, but choose to return. We talk about building trust in places where systems are still forming, what culturally grounded research actually looks like, and how Egzona is really defining what it means to give back as a member of Diaspora. It's a pleasure to have you, Egzona.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And
so for the audience, if someone asks one of your students or mentees, who is Egzona, what would you hope they say?
Well, I don't know if they say she's my mentor. I'm not sure, actually. I just I would like to think that I'm helpful. So I would hope they'd say, someone who's helped me kind of achieve whatever goal they set out to achieve. Yeah, I think that's about it.
And when you meet someone at a networking event, how do you introduce yourself? What is your story?
That's a good question. I think people close to me would say I definitely need to practice that more. I usually just start with my name, and then I like to focus on the other person. I like to just be like, I saw your talk, or I was recently at a event and about indoor air pollution. And so I, had seen someone kind of give a little presentation. I was like, oh, I really enjoyed your address, and, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. So yeah, I don't actually start with, oh, this is what I do, until they ask me. And then, so right now I am actively working on this environmental neuroscience research incubator, or ENRI. So we're basically doing experiments where we use an EEG cap, and we have people do some cognitive tests while they're being exposed to traffic noise, nature sounds, and as a control, just complete silence. And we want to better understand how our cognition changes within different soundscapes. So that's my biggest focus. Meanwhile, I also, as you mentioned, lead the nonprofit. So we have some programs that we do annually, like BrainCamp. We're trying to create BrainCamp for kids as well this year, and hopefully Climate Camp, which is a bit into the environmental neuroscience, but also a bit more in climate science. And yeah, that's kind of, that's it.
Amazing. And of course, you were born in Kosovo and grew up as a refugee in Belgium. Tennis was your entry point to the US, of course, holding all these different identities. How do you think that shaped your approach to the world?
I should mention, just to add a little bit in there, I was actually born in Germany, but when I was 2 weeks old, we obviously came back to Prishtina. So, but I am from Kosovo. That's all I'll ever be. So, yeah, how how these different cultures have shaped me. I mean, if I'm really honest, I think it's the biggest influence was just my parents. Am very close with my parents, and I think they gave me a very good basis, or a good core. They always did say that no matter where I go, I should, be open-minded, and if I see sort of positive things in different cultures or in different people, I should try and take them in. So that's just something I've kind of tried to live by. But I think what I've learned now that I'm much older is that it's important to not forget your roots. I think it is important to have sort of a good anchor and to kind of stay true to who you are. because it can get difficult to be exposed to different cultures, different people, and kind of lose yourself a little bit. And I think that's where it gets tough. And it's happened to me, of course. But I think I found a good way, and I found some very solid things like my parents, my family, friends that I hold on to. And yeah.
After your undergraduate, we were having a chat and you were talking about teaching tennis, working in a reception, and just trying to figure things out as you didn't know your path. What did that time teach you about success not always looking linear?
I also forgot to mention when we talked about this previously, because when you shared your story a little bit, how your mom and a friend got you a job, I remembered actually that one of the managers at this tennis club in New York was a cousin of mine. And so, because my mom is from Montenegro originally. And so I don't know if you know this, but in New York, there's a lot of Montenegrins, like Albanian Montenegrins. And so, yeah, some of them I'm related to. And this was one of those cases. So it was kind of interesting how, my parents lived in Belgium at the time and still they could pull some strings. But it was very, very nice. I'm very grateful for the whole experience. Actually, I think um, it was lucky because I felt like I was still somewhere where I didn't feel all alone. Because my cousin, his name was Zef. He did really like take care of me, and he was always like looking out for me. And I think, again, to the previous point, I think it's something we all share culturally as Albanians, but then, on top of that, we were actually related. So it made me feel very at ease and comfortable, which I realize not a lot of people have that. So I think that made my transition a bit easier. I was also much younger, so I think I wasn't too stressed out about what was happening or what was not happening. The only moment where I really kind of decided to do something was um, I was starting to get a little bit sort of bored with the daily activities because it's a bit repetitive. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just, different people have different goals. And yeah, so again, because I feel like I didn't have much to offer in, from a professional standpoint, um, a nice thing I think that exists here in the US and also other European countries, I would say, is this culture of volunteering. And I'm specifying these countries because I know from experience that um, in Kosovo, this is kind of building up. It's not really very established yet, but I think it's a very good thing because you do build experience, you do build skills, and this is something you can take, to your next job or goal, whatever. And it just makes you personally feel like you're not standing still. So I think that was kind of the main thing. If I had to, well, I try to not give people too much advice. I can just share my experience. But I would just say that when I feel like nothing's going or I'm not really achieving anything, I try to just focus on like one little step and make sure that it's a step further than, yesterday. So, for example, right now, um, getting grants is not really going. But at least, compared to yesterday, I have submitted a grant. So there's that.
Someone who's grown up in the diaspora away from Kosovo, you decided to return with all the knowledge you have. How do you handle both feeling like an insider and an outsider, especially in scientific spaces where a lot of trust and credibility is very, very sensitive?
I think that's what attracted me to the US in the first place. I don't necessarily feel like an outsider. If anything, I will say my experience in growing up in Belgium, I very much felt like an outsider. And then when I came to the US for undergrad, that was the first time that it was almost celebrated to be sort of a foreigner, or it was, I mean, I've always experienced it that when I introduce myself and I say I'm Albanian, people, even though if they don't know where that really is, they're always like, oh, cool. And I feel like people are more open here to different things, because in Belgium, I definitely didn't experience that. So I think that helped me a bit, again, to just kind of keep my own identity. Um, I would say I felt more like an outsider um, back home before I lived there for a year. But I will say that I think that's more like self-induced. Um, I felt like an outsider because obviously, you know, at the time when I was 17, which is a while ago, um, I I obviously was used to some different things like in Belgium, and different sort of maybe materialistic things and opportunities in Kosovo. So it was a little different. And I think the sort of discomfort of that made me feel like, oh, I am an outsider because people don't understand what I'm saying here or what I mean. But I think that was very much self-induced, because when I then kind of just opened myself to the experience when I lived there for a year, I loved it, loved every second of it. I loved being with my family. I loved not having to switch languages. I loved not having to explain anything to anyone about like why we do certain things the way we do. Um, and that happened within a few months, And so I'd spent basically my whole was it like 14 years in a different country, and within a few months I fully just integrated. I loved it. And so I think, yeah, I think you have to be open to experiences, right? I think that kind of goes for anything you do. So I can't really say that I feel like an outsider. Um, I will say I'm very aware that I live here in Boston, and so it's still culturally different from if I, lived in Prishtina now and I wanted to do the same things. I'm very, very aware of that. But that doesn't mean that things can't change, even if they're slow. That doesn't mean that it's impossible that people think similar to me if they live there, because that's not true at all. Um, I've I've met and I'm good friends and close with many people who think very similarly, and they, live and work in Kosovo. So it's I maybe I am considered an outsider, but let's say I don't identify as one.
Of course, you moved back to Kosovo when you were 17, as you said, for a year. A lot of people, first, why did you move back? And second, why did you then actually leave after as well?
You know what? I'll be really honest here. I was doing my high school in Belgium, obviously, and so must have been 15, 16. I was sort of at the height of my tennis career. Like I had there was like this big news article that come out in the Belgian papers, and my mom still has it, like it's hanging in my old like childhood room. And the title was like, maybe I'll be a doctor one day. And it was like this big picture of me. Um, and I was in school at the same time. I was studying like math and Latin, and I was, a good student. And I honestly, I can't say why, but it all just went to my head, and I was like, oh, I'm such a good tennis player. I don't have to practice that much. I'm really smart. I don't have to study that much. And it just went downhill really fast. Um, so yeah, I actually, the last year of my high school, I had to finish it in Prishtina, because in Belgium they gave me the option of changing my direction completely, because you have like different directions there where you study like math and Latin or sciences or languages or whatever, or to fail the class. And neither of those options were great. And so it was a very traumatic experience, honestly. But yeah, so then my parents said, you know what, how about we go to Prishtina? I actually can't quite remember how it all came together, because what I do remember as a kid was that I was really, really sort of ashamed of what had happened. I felt like, my parents had worked so hard for everything that I had, and I felt like I just wasted it within a few months just because, I thought I was all that. And yeah, so we went to Pristina. Um, at that point, I would have done anything. If my parents had sent me to like the army, I'd be like, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. So yeah, we went to Pristina. It was just me and my mom because my dad had to stay in Belgium to work, but he would come visit often, obviously. And I can't describe how traumatic this whole experience was. Like, I forgot how to sort of write my own name, meaning like, how E is like three
Hmm.
stripes. I was like, is it to the left? Is it to the right? I was so, because I never thought anything like that would happen to me. Because again, it was like, oh, I do think I'm a smart person. And then this basically was like, no, you're not. That's how I took it. And so it took a lot of uh, building myself up again. And I think this is why I feel so connected and close to my family and my home, because obviously my family was very, very supportive. Most of my first cousin and I were like around the same age. We're very close. We all, talk on the phone a lot. And I don't know, I found myself in a place where no one was really judging me. No one was um, being like, oh, you're so dumb. Not that I don't think anyone would say that to my face anyway, but yeah, it was just very, very nice. And then, yeah, I think that's how you create loyalty, right?
100%. And then why did you go back after?
Yeah. Then, so I didn't play tennis that whole year while I was in Pristina. And I mean, I played here and there, but not like tournaments or anything. Um, and then, interestingly, I went back to Belgium, and I was supposed to study at the University of Leuven, and I was going to study architecture. So I had taken this class all summer with a friend, drawing and stuff, because I like to draw and I'm pretty good at it. Um, and it was me and my dad. We went to this open house, and again, I was still in this kind of state of mind where I was like, I'll do anything my parents say. If they want me to be an architect, I'll be an architect. If they want me to be whatever it is, I will just do it, because I just felt so guilty. Not that they made me feel that way. I just took it that way. Um, and on the drive back with my dad, he said, you know, I don't really think you want to do this. And I was like, oh, no, I'm good. I'll do whatever. Because we had been approached by this company. I don't know if it still exists, but it was called like Over Border Sport or something. So this was a company in Belgium, and they would reach out to like top 10 tennis players in Belgium, like junior tennis players. And they would say, if you want to play in the US on a scholarship, you can continue sort of playing tennis, semi-professionally, collegiate level, and you get a full scholarship. Um, and so they'd approached me, and I thought that this was once again something to, um, it felt like a reward to me, And so I was like, oh, no, that's fine. So my dad in the car says, I think you want to go to the US. And I was like, oh, no. um, and he said, no, I think we should do that. Um, I mean, he didn't have to ask me twice. I think part of me didn't want to go back to Belgium because I felt like a failure. I felt like a loser. And actually, when I think back to it, even when I went to the US and I would come back to Belgium, that feeling didn't really leave me for a very long time. It was so intense that I sometimes felt like, we would go to like a cafe or something with some friends, and it felt like the waiter could tell what had happened to me. So again, very self-imposed. Um, but yeah, I think maybe that's part of it. Maybe I just wanted to try something completely different. Maybe I wanted to test myself. Who knows? I don't really know. But um, my mom was pretty upset because, her only child, her daughter was like moving 3,000 miles away. Um, but yeah, that was an experience on its own. As a young person, I very much enjoyed it. Um, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, I just studied all day and did nothing else. I did what young people do, and yeah, it was a great experience as well.
So after moving to the US now, you're on your tennis scholarship. How did you actually find your way into neuroscience?
That's actually a really silly story. So I when I was after college, when I was at that tennis club, I started volunteering for this organization called Learning Disability Association in New York. And so I would work with people who have dyslexia, dyscalculia, and stuff. And I started to get sort of more interested into like, why is this all happening? Because what we did there was mostly, practice with students. So um, they would get like a particular book or like a text. Sorry. And um, we would kind of go through the text, and that's kind of how they would practice and like, reading words. And because, as you may know, dyslexia is where you see certain words, but the letters get all mixed up. And then I kept kind of asking myself, like, but why does this happen? And I didn't really, like pursue it or anything. Um, but it was really random because I went out with some friends in New York, and this guy at a club starts talking to me, and the usual, oh, what do you do, blah blah blah. And so I asked him what he does, and he goes, oh, I'm doing a PhD in neuroscience. And I'm like, what is that? Are you just making stuff up right now? And so actually we start talking about it, and I found that I was super interested in just this research, this field. Um, and to this guy's credit, really, he was like a nice guy, and he was really supportive of like, you should, if you really like this, you should go for it, you should pursue it. um and I did. So I applied. I actually applied to the, what was it called, the developmental psychopathology course. um and then I took some neuroscience classes, but then within a semester I changed it to a neuroscience degree because I just really, really loved it. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. Um, and then from there, again, it was very difficult to get into a lab or to find a lab. I must have sent over like 70 emails to different labs. But because when you don't have sort of practical skills, it's much harder to get into a lab, um, even as a volunteer. And so my very last interview was at um, this lab with Professor Robert Fromke at NYU, and I almost didn't go. I remember like it was yesterday. I remember I was standing in front of the NYU Langone Hospital and thinking, ugh, I can't take another rejection. Um, and so I went in, and I remember saying to Rob that I know nothing about labs, not at all. I've never really worked in a lab. Um, I think I said something like, if you leave me unsupervised for too long, I don't know what will happen. Um, and I remember he laughed at that. And then he said, yeah, can you start tomorrow? And he then also told me, I have two other Albanian girls in my lab. And I was like, what? I was like, that really sealed the deal for me. Um, and so all these people, most of the people from this lab, they're still very close friends of mine. Obviously, the two Albanian girls are like sisters to me. Rob is on the board of my foundation. This is like a decade ago. And he's still someone that, I consider a mentor and a role model. So yeah, sometimes, when you find good people in your life that help you move forward and just, help you see sort of maybe the best parts of yourself, like hold on to them.
100%. What was your parents' reaction? Of course, I don't think they came to you with America. I think, did you go by yourself to America?
Oh yeah, so my mom, so I had a few offers to go to different universities, and we chose the one in New Jersey because it was the closest to New York, because going back to there's a lot of Montenegrins there. And my mom was very like, oh, my family's there. Because actually, when she was younger, so in her 20s, she did her master's in New York as well. So this was like in the 80s. No, a little bit before the 80s, maybe. Yeah, something like that. And so yeah, she had been familiar with New York as well. She came with me for a whole month, not on campus, obviously. She was staying in New York, and she would come visit me every now and then. I think she was secretly hoping I wanted to go back. Um, but yeah, she just wanted to make sure I was okay. I also, got close with family members that I would have probably never met before.
And what was their reaction when you tell them, of course, hey, I'm going into neuroscience? Of course, you haven't mentioned any of this before to them.
Yeah, that was another very cute moment with my dad, actually. I had chosen to study psychology in college because, to kind of go back to that newspaper article, I did want to be a doctor, but I thought after everything that happened, I was like, oh, I'm not smart enough. I can't do it. So let me pick something that maybe is a bit more intuitive for me. It's not like, how to say, an exact science. And yeah, I was like, let's see how this goes. Um, I mean, to each their own. I think psychology is definitely an important field, but it just wasn't something that was very sort of not not inspiring, but it didn't challenge me enough, or it didn't maybe provide me with the answers that I was looking for. Um, and so I called my dad and I said, well, they knew that I was starting my master's. But then I called him, I was like, oh, I think I found this field and I think it's so cool and interesting and it's, very scientific. And my dad said something like, um, huh, you've, he's like, you've always been like this. He's like, you've always really liked science as a kid. You were always very logical. You liked math and these things. And I was like, are we talking about the same child here? Because I don't seem to remember that. And he was like, no, that's how you were. And so he's like, I'm not gonna say, uh, I was surprised when you chose psychology, but it's your path. And he goes, and I think it was more important because then I said something like, why'd you let me choose psychology? That's like 4 years that I didn't waste them, but to go into neuroscience, I had to really catch up with all of the sciences. And it was so, like, that was really hard. Not even gonna pretend it wasn't. It was really hard. Um, and he was like, I just thought it was important for you to come to this conclusion yourself. I think he said something along the lines like, you have to just find yourself and be good with you. And now you're in a place that is making you happy. And I was like, good parenting right there.
100%. And of course, everything you've done with neuroscience now, you've launched BrainCamp, which has become something very huge in Kosovo. How has it started? What was your inspiration? And then what was the first year like? Because you got all your PhD friends to fly out to Prishtina. How did you get that to happen?
The way it started was actually because of my institute, so the Sainsbury Welcome Center. The director there is Tom Vlogel, and he's, great director, great person as well. And I went to him and I want to say the CSO, who was Tom Otis, both Toms. I went to them and said, I would really like to start some sort of, small neuroscience program in my home country, because I think neuroscience doesn't necessarily exist there like it does here. And I was like, do we have any funding for stuff like this? And they said, yes, just make a little budget, how much you need, what you need, and, go for it. It was actually, very, very supportive, very simple. And then I just made a very easy sort of syllabus. And all these things, again, I didn't sort of come up with anything new, these are all things that exist. I didn't just, I put a syllabus together, but I didn't reinvent the wheel. Like, this is all things that, anyone could do. Like, if you wanted to, I don't know, organize every Saturday to teach 1 hour about neuroscience in your local high school, you could very easily do that, especially now with like all of the information with ChatGPT and all of this. It's nothing, nothing major. But so at the time, yeah, they said, what else do you need? And so I was like, I would need some people who are willing to teach. And so 4 friends came with me. I didn't teach the first year because I wanted to see how it's all going. Then also in London at the time, the ambassador was Mr. Lirim Grajcevci. And so I went to the embassy and I said, this is what I would like to do. Do you know anyone who would be interested in this? Because I didn't really know who to even approach in Prishtina. And he said, actually, there's this institute called the Atomi Institute, and they identify gifted students in Prishtina, and they provide extracurricular activities and support. And so I was like, oh, that sounds great. So I met with them, and at the time, Miss Naime Hoja, she wasn't the executive director yet, but I think she would become the director in a year or two. But yeah, again, also someone who's very, very close to me, like a dear friend, also on the board of the foundation, because now I'm also on the board of Atomi Institute. And yeah, just kind of took off from there. I always say this, but I genuinely fell in love with these kids. I just thought they were obviously smart. I also couldn't fully appreciate what the word gifted meant until you like see it in practice. But I think what struck me the most was that they were so polite with each other. They were so kind. They and I felt like knowing the environment that they're currently in, and that they can understand that, if, let's say, maybe if they were born in Belgium, they would have had some different opportunities, potentially, more opportunities, knowing that that's possible, but still being so motivated and inspiring while in an environment that has kind of yet to catch up. I thought that was so impressive. Because again, it's, I really do think it's not that difficult when you grow up in a country that, has a very good educational system and all of that, to, have a career, have a good job. But when you're in a country that's building that still and finding its way, which, by the way, also, we haven't been a country for that long. And I think for the time we've had, we're doing really, really well. But yeah, as teenagers, that's not necessarily how you think. So I thought that was very inspiring. And that led to the creation of the foundation, because one of the kids there wanted to attend a prestigious summer program at Yale. And yeah, so I thought, all right, let's find a way to get this funding together for this person and have them go do this program.
What was that moment like then? Of course, you said that student that went to Yale, and she's also leading BrainCamp for Kids, I believe, as well now. How has all of that full circle felt? And also, you told me the story of how did you actually fundraise for her?
So these are actually two different people. So the girl that kind of inspired it, um, she was attending a summer program, but then the person I was mentioning yesterday, her name is Laura Dragusha. She is currently studying neuroscience at Yale. And so she was a BrainCamp student. I don't want to claim that, oh, it was absolutely BrainCamp that motivated her, but I think maybe like for me, it was kind of a moment where she thought, oh, I'd been thinking about something like this, and actually this looks great, kind of maybe a little push. Um, and yeah, so now, like you said, in a full circle moment, we've asked her to sort of create BrainCamp for kids. So she's mostly in charge of that. And we're working with another organization called Bonevet in Prishtina. So her and the Bonevet representative, Verona, they're kind of creating a syllabus together. And hopefully this will run summer 2026 as well. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the goal, right? I just want to through the foundation and through this research, I kind of just want to um, give people opportunities and maybe just show them, this is one way to do things if it speaks to you. But by no means is it like the only way or the right way. It's just a way. And if you're interested, I'm here. If not, that's fine. But yeah, the fundraising, that was more so when I was living in New York, I was working at NYU, and because I had a young person's lifestyle, I needed some extra funds, shall we say. And so I also decided to teach tennis over the weekends because you get paid pretty well. Um, and so when I went to Prishtina, I was thinking to myself how um, this student, she wanted to go to the summer program, and she needed I think it was around $3,000 that she needed. And so for me, that would have been around, um, that would have been not a huge amount of hours that I would have to teach tennis. And I thought it's kind of crazy how that works. Like I could, if I was, in her shoes, I could just fund this myself because I have these opportunities. And I thought for her, this is such a great opportunity, and she can't really find an easy way to fulfill it. Um, I don't know quite how to describe it, why that seemed so crazy to me. But I think because, I've always had, kind of like you said earlier, inside or outside, I always had one foot in each place. And I think, especially a few years ago, the difference was a bit more stark than it is now. Um, and so I just felt like it seems that uh, maybe there's this opportunity for me to contribute in some way. Um, Again, I personally didn't have the funds, and it would have been too late if I had done it my way. So then instead I thought, I know all these sort of clients that I've had that I taught tennis, and I thought maybe I could ask them, maybe someone wants to donate some money. Because, I used to also teach besides New York City, in country clubs in the Hamptons and whatever. So these are people who would say stuff like, they would give me $100 tip and be like, oh, this is change. Good for you. um, and yeah, within, I think it was literally a matter of days, they're like, oh yeah. And they gave me more than what she actually needed. And so this then became kind of like oh, maybe I can do this more often. And yeah, so then I started, kept up with BrainCamp. We organized a few conferences, small conferences. We've given some scholarships. We try to partner up with people to provide programs. But again, I really just want to reiterate that similar to ALSA, right? This is just, if people just start doing things, that's all it really is. I don't think you don't need a PhD at all to do any of this. It's just, if it's something you want to do, you try to find ways to make it happen, and that's kind of all you need.
And we'll talk more about the culturally grounded work you described as neuroscience in Kosovo. What does that actually mean to you in practice? And how do you make sure all of these experiments and education reflect for the local lived realities rather than imported ideas from the US?
I think that's a question I'm still figuring out, actually. It helps to have good people to work with. It helps to find people who, you're on the same page with. I think the answer is, if you don't know something, find someone who does and listen and try to do your best. So in regards to the experiments, even here in Boston, what I'm doing, the experiments, themselves are very sort of exploratory. So my goal is to just kind of find out if we can see that there is a difference between traffic noise and nature sounds. And then if there is, what is it? And that's the same thing I want to do back home. That's kind of, I want to see, is there, what is it? And then maybe compare it to Boston. And then, you just kind of go, because the nice thing about science is, if you're doing good science, you're going to answer one question and then add another 10 different ones to it. So I think I'm just kind of trying to stay open-minded. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to pay attention, but I'm also trying to sort of sprinkle a little bit of, maybe we could do something a little different. Maybe we could do it better. But I don't think it's beneficial, or I don't think that people forcing their own sort of perspective or like your own views onto a situation, I don't think that ever works. Obviously, an exchange of perspectives or opinions is important. But yeah, I also think I am pretty, how to say, familiar with my own culture, with my own home. So I would like to think that I'm sort of understanding and compassionate enough. But yeah, I mean, it's probably never going to be the same as someone who lives there, right? I can't, no matter how open-minded I am. So yeah, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to figure it out still, I guess, is the final answer.
You mentioned how you wanted to map how environmental stress shapes the mind in both Boston and Prishtina. Is there any findings that are surprising you right now? And what are the differences also that you're finding between both cities?
So I haven't started experiments in Prishtina yet. I'm actually currently just trying to get permission to do experiments, which is proving to be a bit of a lengthy process, but we'll get there. What I found here was actually kind of interesting, because I assumed that if I just played nature sounds for everybody, they would just, be very focused and they would like it. But what I actually found was that some people did not mind the traffic noise at all. For like one or two participants, it even was like, oh, I think this is when I focus best. And those same participants, then when they would hear the nature sounds, they would feel almost like sleepy. Like one participant, I made a note, I remember that the participant like yawned 7 times. And this is like a 20-minute session, which then just told me that there clearly is sort of a sweet spot for everybody. That it's not just a very universal, like, oh, everyone's going to just react the same, which I feel like I kind of should have expected that in hindsight. But it's it goes back to, how you grew up, where you grew up. Maybe, as a kid, you always grew up in a city and you're actually kind of used to this. And this is how your brain has managed to adapt to focus and learn by hearing traffic noise. And so this is kind of where, because my PhD and most of my research has been in mice. And so this is where working with people is new for me, and it's definitely interesting, but it's also like, ugh, I can't always get like a very precise answer, because, you know, you have to consider the ages, the sex, the lifestyle, all of these variables, and it's impossible, right? You can't, unless I'm doing like twin studies or something, and even then, it's completely it's still not very precise. Um, but it's interesting. I think it's important. I think that we, as a society, we've started to care more about our well-being in different ways. I think, we've become more aware of how exercise is good. So, we started counting our steps. We started paying attention to how we sleep. We started paying attention to what we eat. Um, I, personally started paying attention to not having a lot of plastic in the home. Like everything now that we have is like metal or like, stainless steel, whatever. Um, and then I thought, but it's interesting how air pollution and heat and noise are also stressors, but for sort of all intents and purposes, they're invisible, right? I can tell you all day, oh, air pollution is bad. And it's not something that you're really going to register because we haven't made that data very visible yet. Like an example, I don't know if it's the same for you, but if I see like, some like really greasy burger or something in front of me, I might want it, but I also know that this is probably not going to be good for me. And it's because, that has become sort of we've seen the data, we've seen kind of what happens, we understand it now. And I think that's where environmental neuroscience is coming in. That's where we're trying to make these different stressors. I think, for example, with heat, that you feel, you know, not great when it's too hot. But what does it actually mean for your brain? Like, is it, can you can focus less? Are you more irritated? What's actually happening? Um, so yeah, I think it's an important field, obviously, or what am I doing? Um, but it's interesting. I think there's a lot to do. Um,
Working on both mice and human brain. First, the question is, why do you do it? And second, what is the biggest struggles of both?
or actually, let me start with people. So, for example, if you want to understand, um, during my PhD, I wanted to understand how tennis players, how they manage to um, stand still on a tennis court waiting for a ball to arrive, but stand still in such a way that, you put like your arms in a certain position because you're ready to like hit the ball. But at the same time, your brain's calculating where to go stand, how long to stand there for, and how fast this ball is coming, all of these things. And I was like, how does it do that? So you start with that question. And then you realize I have to really narrow it down because what I just described is a whole lot of processes happening. So if I want to figure out what the brain is doing, I have to focus on one thing. So then I started focusing on something that's called postural adjustments. In my case, it was an anticipatory postural adjustment. I haven't said those words in so long. It's like a PTSD moment. But so these postural adjustments, the way they work is, the word itself, anticipatory, kind of gives it away, where you're expecting, for example, the ball, you're expecting something to come your way, or you're expecting to fulfill a certain movement. And your brain prepares your body to, let's say stand in like a kind of a squat position or something. So you're stable. The whole idea of the brain is to prevent you from falling. And then you start thinking, okay, so now I went from all these movements to one movement, but now I realize even this one movement is kind of still too much because there's still a lot going on. So I really have to narrow it down even more. So eventually I narrowed it down to what happens when we're just standing still and we want to take one step forward. And so apparently what happens is um, your brain kind of sends all of these signals to different brain areas in preparation for you to just lift off your heel and create momentum to move forward. But that lifting off of the heel is now already not part of you doing this anticipatory postural adjustment. So now what I found is actually the movement I want to focus on is about 200 milliseconds long. And I was into my PhD, I think, for like a year and a half when I realized all this. I was like, oh, all right, well. So then another thing is, so they did this in people, right? So they would put people on a force plate and then they would tell them, take a step forward. And so you can measure sort of the force that they exert onto the plate and then measure that way what's happening. But you still don't know what is happening in the brain because obviously you can't probe someone in the brain like, oh, let's see what's going on here. So then you go to the mice. And unfortunately, we can probe their brains. I will say, for those who don't know, as neuroscientists, when we do any type of surgery on animals, we go through extensive training, and it's very, very, very strict policies that we have to follow, and get a lot of training to, make sure that all of these animals are, uh, you know, feeling comfortable, as much as they can be, and that we do everything properly. So yeah, that's where we get to the mouse models because they're in the neuroscience field. There's a lot of different techniques that you can use to really research the brain, look at the neural circuitries, look at specific just neurons, and then somehow come up with a theory or some sort of idea of how this is happening. I mean, I did not figure it out, by the way. So, but that was a good 5 years of my life for my PhD and then 2 years at NYU.
How do you navigate these systems, as you said, that because you still haven't found the answer for that, you still did research? Of course, there's a lot of time and effort into that. How do you come to the thing of, okay, I didn't find an answer, but it's fine to move on?
I wanted to kind of continue pursuing it and kind of maybe go in a different direction. But then when we moved to Boston, I kind of didn't feel like I wanted to be in academia anymore. I didn't like it very much after my PhD. And so, but then a year after that, I started a postdoc at MIT. So I was back in academia. And then I thought, it was a great experience. But then I thought I actually want to go back to the research I used to do in neuroscience. I feel like science or the PhD or my job was never central to my life. I think it was more important that I also just am happy, and I'm a good partner and everything. So I think that's how you can move on from a job or a research topic. But I do think that even with environmental neuroscience, I'm still kind of so I'm doing this human research now. Ideally, I want to go back the mouse studies because I want to do more specific experiments again. Like they already have they do studies in mice where they expose them to diesel exhaust and then measure again what the physiological changes are in the brain, and that's something I think is important. I would like to do that. And then a lot of these stressors are also related to neuroinflammatory diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, one of them being Parkinson's. And actually, towards the end of my PhD, I kind of also made a link between these postural adjustments and Parkinson, because it's one of the sort of late onset symptoms that they don't have a treatment for yet. And so I find myself, I'll probably make my way back to whatever it was I was trying to do during my PhD as well. So I think it's just a matter of when you find something that you really like, I'm sure you'll find a way to get back to it. And if you don't, then hopefully you really like what you're doing currently. Yeah.
Definitely. And you mentioned that someone called you Spider-Man because you have this Spider-Man in a lab vibe, renting a basement, setting up all of your own experimental space. What does it feel like to create something like this from scratch?
It was just kind of the only solution that I saw in the moment to kind of continue what I was doing. I think because I was so set on starting another postdoc, and then funding situation didn't work out. I thought I can't just spend a whole year again, like when I first moved to Boston, not doing anything. Because I thought, I'll probably get depressed and it'll be really depressing, and then I don't know what's gonna happen. So, to follow my own advice from earlier, I just tried to take one step at a time. And I was like, what if I just start doing these experiments? And shout out to ChatGPT because I just went online and I thought, you know, if I wanted to open my own lab, what are the things I have to do and make sure that it's all, legal and it functions and all of that? And is it possible to do it through your own nonprofit? And so that's what I did. I got something called IRB approval, so that allows you to do research. And I thought, I am a scientist at this point, so I know what I'm doing. I also have my nonprofit board. They're very professional, good people, scientists, and so they're very supportive. I have a ton of people to ask questions or advice. And then I just had to find an office. I got a small grant, so I bought an EEG system. I had to learn how to use that, how to make that work. Bought, laptop and all those things. And then I had to find an office that can't be, near a busy street, can't be too loud. An office that I can keep somewhat the same when, people come and do the experiments. I think, yeah, I don't know. If you keep yourself busy and you kind of just do these little things, somehow, they they accumulate and they end up being leading you to where I guess where you were planning on going.
With your postdoc, you said that you had fundraising issues, but then you said in that moment of limbo, you thought that your decision to leave was like a whole main character thing, and then after it felt anticlimactic. Explain that journey to us.
The postdoc you're referring to is the one at MIT, and the one I wanted to start was at Harvard, so that was the second one. So I was gonna do two. Um, but the one at MIT was more, so it was in the Department of Biology, and it was on digital learning. And whereas it was still very interesting, and I thought, especially at the beginning, because this was sort of the beginning of like ChatGPT and all of that, this could be a cool field as well, and it obviously still is. But it again just wasn't necessarily something that I was very passionate about. And and I discussed it with my husband Fede, of course, and he said, if this is not what you want to do, then you should definitely just find something that makes you happy, that you want to do. And yeah, I think I did describe it as like kind of like those movies where you're like, oh, I'm a main character, you know, like quit, and you're like, now everything's gonna happen for me. And then if this was a movie, it would be like a scene where the music stops and nothing's happening for a while. I still don't know, you know, if that like if that was the right decision. It's just that is the decision I made, and I had to just deal with it from that moment on. Will this lead to something? I don't know, but I think all I can do is just stand by the decisions that I make every day. Um, because yeah, I mean, what else am I supposed to do?
Very true. But emotionally, like in that anticlimactic part where it just feels like limbo, you're not sure
Mm.
on your next steps. You felt like when you did leave, you're going to have this thing, and it just what how did you first get out of that situation? And of course, you've described it as just keeping consistent every day.
Mm.
But what in the back of your mind were you feeling? And how does this also link to that moment in your childhood when you were a teenager, when you felt like an underachiever and had to go back to Kosovo? How do those two times in your life link?
I felt like, oh, not again. I also want to say like when these things happen, I am also that person that will just kind of sit on the couch. I watched The Office for the 100th time and just kind of, you know, letting my brain rot maybe for like a day or two and just do nothing and just kind of wallow a little bit and, you know, feel sad for myself. Every now and then listen to some like sad music. um, I I really I don't have like a specific answer. I think it's very different for different people. Like I've seen my husband, for example, um he's sort of less emotionally intense than I am, and so he's more like calm and steady. And he'll take things much differently than I will. Like for me, it will be like, "Oh, why did I do that? Why do I make such sort of like in the moment or kind of extreme decisions sometimes? Why can't I also just be steady?" Um, but then like I said, it's kind of like you have to make that switch in your mind. Like you have to. There's just no other way. So you have to make that switch of, all right, I need to stand by my decision or else I am just going to wallow here. But it is important that you have good people around you. Um, Not to tell you like, oh, get up, you know, do your thing, whatever, but just to be there. Just to be understanding, be supportive. And that's I think that is what happened both times, and that probably what will happen the next few times that this will happen again. Um, I think it's the people, and that's why I said earlier that for me, the jobs and everything, you can't make those central um, to who you are, because jobs come and go, money comes and goes, but it's the people I think that make these experiences, and um, I think that's how I kind of get through. And it can be something so simple as you go meet a friend for coffee and maybe they make you laugh about something and then you're like, well, life is not that bad. You know, I just laughed. So just and I will say, um, something I have learned is this time around I was um nicer to myself. I know that sounds really cliche. Cannot believe it's coming out of my mouth. But um, I think when I described earlier what happened when I was younger, I I I was basically punishing myself. And this time around, it was more like, you know, you're trying to do something different. You're trying to find out what makes you happy. And so let's do that.
I think that point of your younger self as well is very important because I feel like that comes from a lot of pressure as diaspora that growing up outside and how much sacrifice our parents made. You said you punished yourself, and everything, and the way you described yourself as well is so the way you described yourself as well is that fact of you just did anything because you wanted to accept from your parents that, okay, whatever happens, I'll do whatever you say now, because you felt like you wasted an opportunity and you had all of these things, you were going in such a right direction. And as you said, everything just fell. You could have failed the class, you would have had to take a different step. Why do you feel like other people in the diaspora also feel like this as well? Because it's a common topic. And how do you yourself believe that parents, in your sense, can help their children, or children themselves can describe to their parents so that it helps them? Because it is almost inevitable. Even myself, I always felt like I was going to go into finance or go into any other industry, get a job at the big four, and then I didn't get that grade I wanted and decided, okay, it's not for me. And then having to explain that. How did you go through all of those processes, and how did just that feel for you?
I've definitely heard like a few times about this sort of, oh, we have pressure from our parents and stuff. Um, I don't think I see it that way. What I see or I feel, um, I also want to say I can't speak for anybody but myself. I can't speak for people in the diaspora, but what I feel is I felt that way just because I love my parents so much. And to me, it was just, it wasn't, I wasn't sad because they were disappointed in me, because in fact, um, I remember when my dad came home, I thought I was gonna get like the beating of my life, which I thought, fair enough, fair enough. But not even like, he didn't even yell at me. He just hugged me and he said it will be okay, because I think he could tell that, I mean, I couldn't even look my parents in the eye for like the longest time. But it wasn't because I was scared. It wasn't it, I love them so much that I want to be just this person that makes them smile and happy and they can be proud of. And my mom's the kind of person who she would bring I did my master's at Columbia. She brought them to the bank once and showed like the bank lady my grades, like, you know, and after everything they've been through as people, because I think maybe now that I'm older, I understand them better as well. All I wanted was, you know what? It's like, if this makes you happy, lady, like this is what you should do. And that's what I wanted to be for them. And so it was more of a, I failed in my mission. I failed to do that because I set out to do that. Because I think that's kind of a healthy interaction. You just see how these two people, they love you so much and they show you in this way, they would um like, tennis is a very expensive sport. We were refugees, and their 6-year-old daughter was playing tennis. My my mom, we would go to this like really fancy tennis club because I was invited to train there. Her and I would take 2 buses and travel for like an hour and a half to get to practice. My dad would also come sometimes earlier from work to take me to practice an hour further. When they wanted to keep me into like there's like this Belgian team where you go and like you sleep there and everything. My parents didn't want that for me. My mom was like, I want to make her food. I want her with us. You just tell us when we need to bring her and we'll drive her. Again, an hour away. So that's what that's them showing love. It's not them investing in a product. And I think that's where I disagree when people say, "Oh, it was so much pressure." Um, I didn't feel that. I didn't. It wasn't pressure. It was, I chose to want to repay them or something. I don't know. I mean, to this day, um, like my mom's coming to visit in November. She's staying for a month, and when I walk around like our neighborhood, I'm like, oh, she would love this cafe. We should go here and we should go there. And maybe she'll find this cool and we'll do this activity, because I want to now sort of do what she did for me. Obviously, as a kid, I could never repay my parents. That's not the point. But I want to show her how much I love her in the same way that they did for me. And me being a neuroscientist and achieving all these things, well, uh, they they wouldn't want these things for me if they weren't good. They wouldn't want me to do them if they were bad for me. So I yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I have a different definition of pressure.
Did you feel like you put pressure on yourself because of their situation? Not direct pressure just from your
Yeah,
parents, like
so
you have to do this.
I think I think that's fair. I think I put pressure on myself because I was so adamant of like I want to, be the best child they've ever seen. It's kind of easy when you're the only one. But I mean, for me personally, pressure is like, I remember I was playing like the semifinals at some tournament. It was like 10 p.m. at this point because we had to wait for a really long time to get on the court. And I was playing on the center court, but it was indoors, and so it was like big glass, and people were like watching. Um, I was a set down, and then somehow, miraculously, won the second set in like a tie break. That that is pressure for me. Like that for me is like I need to I need to do this. I need to pay attention. But um, because that I have something to lose. Literally, I have a match to lose. But with my parents, what are they not going to love me because I didn't become a neuroscientist? Like, it's just never, I don't have anything to lose. So why the pressure? I think it's desire, I would say. It's my deep desire of wanting to do that and then maybe just feeling disappointed that I didn't quite achieve it in that moment. But it's never pressure because I don't know what I would have to lose. I think the desire became bigger because I saw that, oh, so even if I screw up, they won't let me go. They'll still be here. They'll still support me. They'll still love me the exact same way if I fail or if I have all A's. And so what's the pressure here?
I think it's a great perspective to have because it's easily in that moment to believe that it is the end of the world in the
Mm,
sense of you've failed, you've disappointed them, you can't see the future in that sense, in that moment in time where you feel all just hate, etc. But I think your point from what you said, you believe that in the sense of, oh, your dad's going to come home, give you the biggest beating, but he came home and hugged you. Did you ever speak to your dad about what he was feeling during that time and why he acted like that?
our relationship just evolved constantly. My dad was also the person who came with me when I wanted to buy sort of my first like heels to go out clubbing, which was, I think, awkward for the both of us, honestly. um, but also knowing, for example, our culture and knowing that, this is a proud Albanian man who had to move to a country he didn't even speak the language, know anything about. And he didn't grow up in Prishtina, in the city. Because my mom, she had lived in New York and she had seen more, so they were a bit different. But for someone like my dad to not even, you know, not necessarily think about these things, yeah, you want to go buy heels, let's go do it. Um, I think for me, that was so touching. It was so like you're going so much out of your comfort zone, which you could really tell. um, that that's love, right? That's you showing like, oh, for you, I'll go out of my comfort zone. It can be something so stupid as buying shoes, but to me, it meant everything. And for him to then, even in those moments, to be like, to find a way to, not yell at me or not be mean. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be a parent yet, hopefully soon, but that's the kind of parent I want to be. I want to be like my parents. I hope I have I don't know, the grace, I don't know what to call it, that they have also still for my mom with me. Because that's what I carry with me. Um those moments.
And how did you describe that one moment when he came home, of course, after hearing about failing the class or having to change? How did he ever tell you how he felt in that moment?
I feel like I'm similar to my dad in that sense. We are kind of blindly loyal to the people that we love. They're just completely blind. Even though it was all my fault, like very much so. I think he, like, part of him believed, like, they always made it hard for you because you're a foreigner, which it was true. I always had to be, extra polite and extra smart and work extra hard. Those things were true. But in his mind, it was like, you know, they're just trying to break my daughter, or they're trying to hurt her or something. And so I mean, I I appreciated that that just diehard loyalty. Um, and I think when we spoke about it many years ago, he would just say something like, "You're my daughter," and that's literally the only explanation I needed.
Amazing. And of course, you've made this foundation with both of their names.
Mm.
What was the inspiration to first take their names, of course, but also carry out with it throughout their name so that they're on the pedestal?
Because he passed away so unexpectedly, and that was obviously traumatic. I think I just wanted to find a way to keep their names going. I want, hopefully, this foundation to exist for many more years. I want it to exist maybe even after I go. And I just want their names to be remembered, because I think it's the only way for me to show how much they mean to me. So, well, that sounded so corny, but it's true.
Of course, with building your foundation as well, building something in Kosovo, what would you say to young Albanians abroad who want to also give back but feel unsure where to start, how to do it?
The best way to start is to think about what you think you can give back. For example, um, I've spent all this time in neuroscience. That's what I can give back. So I can just, make a program. I can organize a conference. I can hopefully extend the research that I do here over there. And there's two volunteers I have right now in my lab, and they're both from Prishtina, but they study in the US. So that's another way, I think start with what can you give back, and then think about where your skills are necessary, and then try to, find someone who knows someone, and kind of, do it in a very scientific way.
What is your long-term vision with a foundation and ENRI, and what would success look like to you in the next 10 years?
I think if you'd ask my husband, he would say that the first step would be that I would get a salary, because I'm not paying myself. He likes to joke that I seem to be allergic to being paid. Um, but I think, all jokes aside, I would like to see the nonprofit be able to give out more scholarships, bigger scholarships. I would like to see BrainCamp for kids, Climate Camp, all of these educational programs running smoothly, having people want to teach, want to take the programs. Um, for the research, I would love to, again, be able to, pay people to be in the lab and really make it into a lab like I've experienced labs, to have one here, to have one in Prishtina, to publish good data, to, you know, discover interesting things. Yeah, that's it. I think success would be, I don't know, that I'm happy where things are. I don't actually know where they will be. I'm kind of, I always like to say this, I kind of just been improvising my life, but I think everyone does. Um, so yeah, I have some things planned, some things are in the works.
Where did that mentality come from about, as you said, being allergic to a salary? And of course, you're in Boston, you're in America,
Yeah.
etc. Where did that mindset shift for you to say you want to do this kind of work, to give back, to research, to learn?
Well, the foundation really just started because I didn't really have anything else to give back. I was a student, so I didn't have uh funding to give back, like, financially. And I thought, I can give back time, knowledge. Um, mm. And then now with the research lab, I just spent all the whole grant on the actual office space and the equipment. Um, and I thought, because it's mine, I don't mind donating my time, because I'm trying to build something. And again, I'm lucky enough, that so my husband's also a neuroscientist. He works with brain computer interfaces, so he has a great job, loves his job, and we agreed that I would have a certain amount of time where I would try to get this off the ground and get grants and funding and make this work, and we'll take it from there. But again, to come back to, when you have someone supportive who believes in you and who's like, I really think you should see this through, then things just they roll, they go.
If one of your students at BrainCamp 20 years from now built a lab that was inspired by you, what would you hope they inherited, not just scientifically, but emotionally?
You think they would still be inspired by me 20 years later? It's a long time. If you just really stay true to what it is you want to do, and if you stay true to um kind of understanding the fact that there's different lived experiences, different perspectives, and just set out to, you know, just be a decent person most of the time, I think not a lot of things can go wrong. That doesn't mean, I work with a lot of people, and you have the occasional disagreement, you have the occasional misunderstanding. Um, you know, be able to acknowledge your own shortcomings and limitations and be understanding of others as well. I think that's the only thing, honestly.
For someone who's listening to this podcast now, as we come to the end, what is one big thing that you would hope that they learned from this podcast and has stayed with them?
Again, it's so cliche, but just that you can do anything that you want. You really can. There's My parents used to always say, everything in life has a solution besides death. And I really live by that. It might take a while, it might not be easy, and think smarter, not harder. I think that's also a thing. Try to not let your ego or your pride get in the way too much. Um, and just, yeah, I mean, when I say follow your dreams, it doesn't have to be, it can literally be whatever. It can be, I don't know, you want to be a singer, you want to be an actor, you want to be an athlete, anything. Just when you do set out to do something, do your very best, and I think you can't go wrong.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Xheladin. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast and learn so much about all the field of neuroscience and everything through your personal journey as well. What are some events coming up? Where can viewers find you?
Yes. We have a big event coming up in February with the Alzheimer's Association. We're organizing a Neuroscience Next a conference in Prishtina on February 25th, so in 2026. And you can sign up for it now, I believe. Or you can sign up for it, but you can definitely submit abstracts as well. So students will have an opportunity to present their research for about 4 minutes, but it will be globally streamed. So I think that's a good opportunity if someone wants to do that. And BrainCamp is in the summer usually, so July 2026. And you can find us on xhmf.org, or you can find me on LinkedIn, where I also have my husband's last name hyphenated. So
Great.
just to make it extra confusing.
Thank you very much, Xheladin. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It was lovely speaking with you.